But if you're talking about learning something about the way people relate and the way groups of people work, yeah, I think you do learn things from a good novel.
Absolutely. It's one of the 5 building blocks when I'm asked to evaluate books, which is every day for customers. When somebody says to me, you know, sell me a good book, what does that mean? Because everyone's definition of a good book is unique to that person.
Right.
And it's tough to figure out always what it is they want. And you do a little interview thing. But when I'm evaluating books in a larger sense, there's, to me, actually setting is my favorite thing, followed by character. Plot's my least, I care less about plot, mostly because there just aren't that many, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, and so you're getting variations on a theme by so-and-so more often than original. But then content matters to me. You know, if I can learn, whether it's Aaron Elkins telling me how to boil a body down using simple household ingredients to bone, or whether it's you telling me, you know, in Letter of Mary, you know, talking to me about Old Testament issues and scripts and so forth. And then, of course, style, you know. It's, I always refer to it as that sort of gold that washes over everything else. If you can't write, doesn't matter how interesting all the other stuff is. If it's clunky,
That's true. Yeah.
if it's Dick and Jane, you know, who cares? But it certainly, I think, is one of the reasons that your books are so interesting, is there's never been one of your books that didn't have content. I mean, I'm giving you the other 4, but I think that content is always what brings me to your books. I always know I'm going to learn something, or at least think about something I haven't previously considered.
I wonder, I mean, not to say it's true or not true, but I wonder if that's because when I am first looking at a book, first thinking about what the next book is going to be, which usually is not the one I'm about to start, but the one that's out there somewhere.
Ah, right.
What I will look for is something that really hooks me. And what usually hooks me is an idea or, for example, in O Jerusalem, what I wanted to look at is the decisions that the British made in the period where, after the First World War, where they were given the governing of what was then called Palestine. The decisions the British made that have had effects that we are living with today.
Severe
so
effects.
that's what I was looking at there. It's actually a fairly small part of the book, but it was something that was in my mind as I was writing it, and I think probably affected the entire book ultimately. I mean, similarly with Darker Place, you have this woman looking at what does make a valid religious tradition. I mean, if you're talking about alchemy, why is alchemy any less acceptable as a religious tradition than Christian scripture? And on the one hand, it isn't, and on the one hand, it is. And it's too simple to say, well, all religions are right. And someone like Anne Waverley would not say that. But she would say there are things we can learn from all of them. So yeah, most of the books do have something at their core which doesn't necessarily play a major part in the way the plot works out, because I'm a storyteller. I'm not a teacher in these books. So,
well, but you do transfer your own interest and your own, you know, core thought to us. And going back to A Darker Place before we leave it, because I think it's a book you wrote that maybe fewer people will know about than the Mary Russell books, so I wanted to dwell on it for a minute. Anne is not going in to evaluate the sect that she's assigned to for its religious content so much as she's there to determine how stable it is, right?
She goes in order to analyze, the stability of each group that she's looking at.
Could it turn into another Jonestown?
Yeah. That the problem, and this in real life is the problem that law enforcement agencies have, is that on the one hand we have freedom of religion, and we can't tell people how they are to run their religious lives. On the other hand, we have laws against mistreating children, we have laws against mass murder. So you have to look at each group from the inside, in effect. Learn its language, learn its symbolic content, and say, yes, these people are flaky, but they're quite stable, you know.
In there, do you not also need to sort of try to guess the agenda of the leader?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that she's looking at. Some of these groups do have a very strong central leader, which is always dangerous if the leader is unstable.
Exactly.
So when she goes in, and that's why a part of this book is set, in fact, just in Sedona. And the stability of that group is quite marked, even though they're really quite off the wall when it comes to their religious expression. I mean, you know, they basically they believe in alchemy.
Well, Sedona would be a good place for that. I mean,
That's
you know,
what I thought.
yeah.
I mean, I went to Sedona and thought, I'm at home here.
Yeah.
You know, I understand these people. And then when she goes off to nice, stable England with its, you know, traditions of, that's where she finds the problems beginning and instability setting in. So, yeah, she's looking at the leadership as well as the people.
It's a fascinating book, and I have to say, of all of your books, when I first read, you know, the outline or the concept of the book, it was the one where I was most puzzled as to how you were going to have it turn into a pulsing thriller. And yet, in many ways, I think it's the most exciting book that you have ever written, and it does have a real challenging ending, both in terms of what happens and in the fact that you leave us with an ambiguous result for Anne.
I don't.
Well,
Really, I don't. People
you may
insist
claim
on
that, but those of us who read it would like, well, whatever it is, I'm very interested to know if you will be doing a sequel.
I think with this book, you need to know what happens to the kids.
Right.
I think most of the issues are fairly finally settled. I mean,
Well, we won't dwell on
you may
the
not
one.
know. Okay, we can argue about that one, but you know, one of the characteristics of this genre that we work in and love is that there is an ending. And in mainstream fiction, quite often, there really isn't an ending. It's just that people sort of pack their bags and leave, and the reader says, oh, okay, and bye. Whereas with a thriller or a mystery or a suspense novel, you have to have an ending. It has to settle a thing. And this one does have an ending. even
Clear to you, if not to me.
It's clear
huh?
to me. But there are unresolved issues with the two kids. There's a teenager and his young sister who become important to the main character and become important to the plot. And I think you need to know not only what happens to the kids, but what in the past has happened to the kids. What is their story? How did they end up in this community? So at some point, yeah, I will need to write a sequel of some sort in order to work out the kid's story.
Well, and I shouldn't really have used the word sequel. What I was really thinking of, and you've articulated it much better than I did, is that the other half, so to speak,
Yeah.
because there is kind of a sense, at least there was for me when I got to the end, that there was probably another half of the story.
Yeah.
But I don't see it as something where you would write multiple books.
No,
You
no,
know,
it's
two
not a
books
series
to-
at all.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean-
It's sort of a circular thing, and then when you're done, it's done.
Yeah, it's somewhat similar to what I'm working on at the moment, which is sort of a sequel to Folly.
Okay.
I mean, in Folly, there's this main character who goes to this island, rebuilds the house, and in the course of the story, meets a number of people in, this is the San Juan Islands up in Washington.
Right.
And there's one person who appears at the end of the book named Alan, who I am now writing Alan's story. And it's a sequel in the sense that the main character from Folly does appear in it. You know, Ray has a sort of walk-on part, and she's there for 20 pages, and then I think she flies off to Japan or something. But so she's there, and it takes place after Folly, but it isn't a sequel because it's not the same storyline. I mean, Folly is a one-off. It's
Well,
not a sequel kind of a book.
The woman's trajectory in Folly, you follow it through and it comes to an end.
Yeah.
I mean, what she went to do, which was not just to rebuild the house, but to construct the sense of her own life, it happens.
Yeah. So this is a revisitation of her, but not a sequel.